Exporten är superviktig för att företagen ska hänga med i utvecklingen och inte tappa i sin konkurrenskraft.
Det är viktigt även för startups att tänka globalt redan från början. Se Europa som din hemmamarknad och hela världen som din spelplan.
Att öka exporten från Jönköpings län är oerhört viktigt för tillväxten. Vi ser fler företag som kan växa på nya marknader.
Regional exportsamverkan är ett samarbete mellan 7 olika aktörer. Och på olika sätt så hjälper vi företag med utbildning, med rådgivning, med finansiering och med affärskontakter.
Och tanken med vårt samarbete är att du snabbt ska få den hjälp du behöver. Oavsett vem av oss du vänder dig till.
Tillsammans snabbar vi på dina affärer ut i världen. Hör av dig till oss.
Hejsan och välkomna till den här live-rapporten från 5 för oss viktiga marknader på 3 kontinenter. Och det är då Kina, USA, Italien, Tyskland och Norge. Vi gör det här eventet för att ni ska få en inblick i och kanske också lite behind the scenes hur coronakrisen har påverkat dessa länder. Och framförallt hur företagen påverkas och kommer att påverkas. Vi som arrangerar det här är regional exportsamverkan i Jönköpings län. From now on we're going to speak English so that we can communicate with the foreign participants. And speaking of them, I would like to present the live reporters right now. But first of all, I would say thanks to all of you for being so kind to join us today. So I think I will start in Italy, and I will start with Federica Leonetti from Enterprise Europe Network in Torino. Ciao Federica.
Hi.
Hi. And also from Italy, Tony Marinelli from Italian Chamber of Commerce in Stockholm. Hi Tony.
Hi. Good afternoon everybody.
Hello. And then we go to China and to Joachim Aberlen from Business Sweden in Beijing. Hi Joachim.
Good evening from China.
Good evening. And then so we go further on to USA and to John Sindar from Enterprise Europe Network in New York. Hi, John.
Hi, greetings, everyone. You know, it's okay if you want to speak Swedish because I speak German, which means I understand every 10th word.
Okay. And then we go to Norway.
Yes.
To Björn Storm Halvorsen from Norwegian Swedish Chamber of Commerce in Oslo.
Yes, hello.
Hello, Björn.
And thank you for being invited.
Thank you. And then we should go to Germany.
Hi from Germany. I'm Christian from the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I'm looking forward to the meeting here.
Okay.
What we will try to do now is cover, of course, the business situation mainly in your respective countries here. I think it's interesting. That's the most interesting part for the viewers here, for the companies that are watching this. But let's start with the round first. Just tell us a little bit about your personal life in these in your countries here. How is the daily life right now? We know a lot of things happening, they're opening up, etc. But how is it really? And maybe we should start where it all started, if you like, in China. Joachim, you live in Beijing in China, and you're there now, of course. How is your life in China these days?
Yeah, I would say life here in China is pretty normal, if there's anything called normal these days. But as you rightly pointed out, it started here and it already started end of January. It started before that, but it started having an impact towards the end of January during the Chinese Spring Festival. And since then, of course, the society has learned how to live with the situation and the COVID-19 virus. So today, most people are working back to offices just like normal. They do the normal shopping. They go to restaurants in a normal way, but in a rather controlled manner. I would say there is still crowd control. There is still temperature checking everywhere. Everyone is having a health app in their smartphones, so they can all the time show whether they have a green status or not, and if they're allowed to enter certain places. This is of course something that is changing all the time, and this is actually the last day of the May holidays in China, so this was the kind of first test where people started traveling a little bit. And here in Beijing, restrictions were eased last Thursday, so the day before the holiday started, and Beijing got down to level 1, which is the lowest level. So now most restrictions are gone. People started traveling a bit. Most of the traveling in here has been what is more intra-province traveling, so not long-distance traveling as such. But in China, province is almost like a European country, so you can still travel quite a lot. So there is movement, shopping, normal life, but in a rather controlled manner, and that will probably stay like that for a while.
Perfect. Thank you. Interesting to hear. And of course, the next hotspot if we go to Europe then would be Italy. And Federica, so what's the situation right now in Italy?
Yeah, okay, we have been in a lockdown till the 10th of March, so it's a long time. And only yesterday the government started to reopen some companies and some shops. We can go out now because till yesterday we were not allowed to go out. We need a certification to go outside. We need to explain where we were going and why. So from yesterday, this situation is a little bit changed. It's a very strange life because we can go outside, but shops are still closed. So just some grocery or supermarket. So that's it, and some enterprises. So someone has came again back again to the office, but for the public administration, it's not. That's why I'm at home now, because I can't go in my office. And so we have to see how things will change till the end of May, more or less, till 18th of May. After the 18th of May, some other shops will be reopened, and hope we can have again a normal life, because this is not a normal life. Also, working at home, it's very difficult. We are not used to do it. So the first 2 weeks were very strange. Why we can't go outside, and we have to see colleagues from in a virtual mode. So it was very strange.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good. And then, really, we'd like to hear from America and from the USA. And New York is sort of a hotspot also for the virus now. John, sort of, what is the situation in New York and in the USA at the moment?
Well, it's sort of a hotspot. It is the hotspot, of course, here in New York. Nothing to be surprised about. The most, arguably the most international city in the world was going, and very densely populated. We have about 15 million people living very close to each other in the metropolitan area, somewhat bigger than Sweden itself, I believe. So this is nothing surprising. My friends and colleagues are amazed at my foresight, because I moved out of the city 5 months ago. I live 100 kilometers outside now, where in my community we've had 23 deaths. In New York City, we've have 25,000 deaths.
Yeah.
So personally, I'm doing fine. I haven't been in my office for nearly 2 months. I haven't been able to get a haircut for quite some time. If I was in my office, I would definitely have Swedish and American flags up behind me, just like our friend in China has. But the basic situation in the United States is that we're not coping very well because of the nature of our system, which really speaks to also doing business in the United States. What we're seeing is the extreme federalism of our system. In other words, we're really incapable on reacting and working from a national level, from top down. That just doesn't work like it does in China and in most cases in Europe. Yeah. So the picture here is going to be really varied, right? And so, many states, we have 38 out of 50 states that are now opening up. And the remaining 12 states are the ones that are hit hardest. It's very political, as you might imagine, everything here in the United States. So generally speaking, states with markets that are Trump people, they are opening up. The anti-Trump people are not opening up. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Thank you for now.
Yeah, that's we hear about that as well. So that's really interesting to hear directly from you as well. Thank you. We can come back to some of this also. Christian from Germany. Could you just say a few words about the situation in Germany then?
Sure, I can. Maybe I'm in the participant mode at the moment because there is no button for video, but still, I'm very happy to give you some expressions just by sound. So for me in Germany, or for most people of us, it might feel like every day is a Sunday because a lot of people stay at home. There are just a few people on the streets buying or using public transport, or if they have to leave the house to go to work, they use bikes or cars. But still, a lot of people are in the home office. So it's really an atmosphere like you have between the years, as we say, between Christmas time and Sylvester. So most of the people are at home. And what you can also see is that a lot of people get packages by mail. So they order their stuff online, and then some people bring it, and you can see a lot of paper boxes the next days in the dustbins. And what is also visible is that you have a lot of more products in the supermarkets now because the people stop buying stock. So at the moment, it's getting more to normal life, but just a little bit slower. And even if you want to have a haircut now, as it was mentioned before from some people, it's getting possible, although it's not easy. But this is what life is in Germany at the moment from a personal point of view.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Then I think we only have Norway and Björn left, our neighboring country. You have a bit of a different situation than we in Sweden, I suppose. What's the just a few sentences about the situation in Norway, Björn?
Yeah, I should like to start with the Friday 13th of March. And I don't know if you have it in all countries, but Friday 13th is bad luck. So I had an appointment with my hairdresser that Friday. That was cancelled. But I can live with that. But the date, and this year, I will remember that for the rest of my life. It was crazy when Norway chose the hard strategy and locked down all companies that did personal care, theaters, movies. It was not allowed to gather more than 5 people at the same time. If you had a job in an office, of course you had to go home and have the home office. My wife and I, we have had offices in our living room since that day, 13th of March, and we still have. So it's really strange. Talking a little bit also about the economy, Norway so far has spent 400 billion Norwegian kroner to help businesses. And one thing is that normally, if you lay off people, normally a company has to pay for the first 14 days. Now you only have to pay for 2 days, and then the government takes over the responsibility. And that is a result of that is that the unemployment has gone from 3.6% and has passed 10%.
Yeah.
We don't know if there are unemployment in the future, but that is the situation right now. And then we have another thing is quarantine. Of course, all the borders, if you travel to Sweden today and want to come back tomorrow, you have to go in 2 weeks quarantine. And for the first 6 weeks, some municipalities in Norway even had their own rules. So if you were unlucky to work in one area and live in another, you had to go in 2 weeks quarantine if you traveled across the region. Crazy.
Yeah.
On the positive side, the logistics in and out of Norway has actually been functioning.
Yeah, good.
Amazing.
Good to know.
Very good.
Yeah. So that's actually a good thing. So I will come back to some current situation and then the future later on. But the logistics functioning. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Thank
With some
you very
positive
much.
news as well.
Yeah.
That's always good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we should focus more on the business life. I think it's really interesting. Would be really interesting to hear more for you how it is to be a business person in your country now. How is it to be an entrepreneur? What is the business life, so to speak? And I think we'd like to start in the same way as before. So if Joachim in Beijing, maybe you could say something about business life in China at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It of course depends on what type of business you're in and what type of sector, etc. It's been hard for certain industries, definitely. Office workers got back to offices very fast after. I mean, unlike many countries in Europe, there were only 3 working days in Beijing where it was working from home, and then people got back right after. But of course, factories, I mean, the whole manufacturing cycle has been taking some time to restart. Now, we could see reports very early that most factories were up and running, but they were basically up and running empty. They just turned on power and made sure to boost the statistics. But now the economic output of production is close to the 100% level, at least close to 90% now. So we can see that there is an economic output. The logistics network is working pretty well. So there's a movement of goods now. We can clearly see that both on the also exports starting to pick up. The consumer price index that was peaking a lot in January, February is now going down a bit. So prices are getting back a little bit to normal, less shortages of goods. So if you're not in the most impacted areas, of course, of Wuhan, the Hubei province where it all started, where it's been much harder, and the automotive industry there has, of course, been impacted extremely hard. But overall, businesses are up and running. But what we can also see is that there was more of optimism in March, where people felt that now things are working, the supply chain is ticking again. But then suddenly we felt the global demand shock, and you got the kind of almost second wave. And we can actually see that the optimism in April is a bit lower than in March. For example, the PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index, is now dropping to a little bit below 50, which is, again, indicating a little bit of contraction compared to previous month, because people realize that it's not enough to just produce. You also need to have global demand. And companies here who have a global supply chain are, of course, more impacted than the ones that are more regional or local.
Sure, but I think it's almost back to normal in one way or another, or in some senses at least. That's interesting. Okay, thank you. Let's move on with Italy again then, and I think we turn to Tony now. Tony, what about the business life in Italy? It's just opened up a bit, right?
Yes. To understand the Italian situation, it's important to know that in Italy, since the pandemic exploded, we have experienced those 3 situations: activities that never locked down, agriculture and farming, food production, production of energy-related activities and energy transmission, production of pharmaceutics and production of medical equipment and devices, and some heavy building industry. Those activities have never locked down. Industry, export-oriented industry, was reopened last Monday on April 27. Only industry working with export, and the remaining part of industry they did reopen yesterday on May 4th. As the Italian sub-suppliers, which are the most interesting for the Swedish operators companies, there are some that have never locked down because they work towards those activities that were not locked down. They were lucky, of course, but during this period, their activities, their volumes have diminished. And then you can imagine how the situation was for those companies that have been locked for almost a couple of months. But in general, the Italian companies working with sub-supplying activities, they have those main three concerns today. The first one is they have to look backwards and their supplying chain. Do they have a full control over the supplying or their sub-supplying? And here again, those who could work with open activities are still there. The other have to find after 2 months lockdown, they have to. So a recommendation to the Swedish company, discussing with Italian companies, make sure of the delivery times and make sure that you are working with companies that can have a control all over the chain. Then those companies have to cope with internal concerns. And if they are, as the white collars are concerned, most of them still can work smart work from home, while blue collars, unless the company are not digitalized, they have to go to work. And there are some problems connected with commuting, transportation, and so on. But many of the Italian sub-supplier companies are working outside metropoles. So there you can go by car. It's not a big problem. Okay. And then they have to look forward. Those who have been, for whom it has been possible to continue production, they have not lost customers. They are still their customers, even if the deliveries have not fit perfectly. And those who have been locked for 2 months, they are wondering, have we still our customers, and so on. But in general, I may say that in Italy, they are very optimistic, and they are very glad that they could start producing again.
Okay.
Thank
Good.
you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to the audience here, don't forget to write questions if you have them. If something comes up now when you listen to the experts here from around the world. So having said that, let's move on to John then in New York. So how is it to run a business now in New York?
Well, you know, as we say, welcome to cowboy capitalism, which is how the U.S. system is often described, which basically means not very regulated, very decentralized decision-making, in this extreme federal system that we have. You know, this sort of cowboy capitalism has its upsides and its downsides for Swedish exporters. I would say that you know, one of the things that's always good about the United States is that over 70% of our GDP is consumption, right? So, I don't think there's any other country in the world like that. Only the United States can consume 70% of its GDP. We have these huge debt. Only we can access debt markets as cheaply and can continue to raise our national debt, which we basically have tripled in the last 5 weeks. On the company level, there's a big problem with company debt. Small companies are generally, I just heard a figure, have $15 trillion in debt. Small companies are starting to go bankrupt. However, again, the advantage in the United States is we do have very good bankruptcy laws that allow small companies to resurrect, unlike in Europe. So, companies here always get second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh chances. But and one of the things that's also, and this is something that Swedish companies need to know, even in a non-COVID environment, is this is a very litigious society. We already have law firms on television trying to find clients to sue restaurants, hospitals, whoever, for getting COVID. So everybody, what we call ambulance chasers, these lawyers who are looking for cases to sue people. And so one of the responses actually at the national level is they're talking about legislation that will curtail that sort of the lawsuits against things. Quickly on industries, what's functioning quite well still is the food and beverage industry, like Italy. However, going back 2 crises ago, the 9/11 attacks, Swedish companies need to know that there are particular regulations of the FDA on bioterrorism. So there's extra steps in bringing food and beverage into the US to make sure that it's not part of a terrorist attack. We have, of course, medical, again, like Italy, like everywhere, the medical system, which is here very, very diversified and getting more diversified. Construction markets still going well. So if you've got construction materials, you have a shot. And then, of course, any technology that would help remote working. Americans love apps. We buy lots of apps. We've had lots of European app clients who have done well here in the United States. And also in that regard, it's good to know that the US is not nearly as worried about privacy as the Europeans are, right? The Americans look at Europe and like, what is their problem? What are they trying to hide? We have no privacy here. And then things like bicycles, e-bikes, scooter, those are hot markets as well.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's that's an interesting situation.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Let's see if we can get Christian from Germany here. Are you there?
I'm there.
Oh, you're there. Okay, good. We can't see you, unfortunately. But would you like to say something about the German situation, business-wise?
Yes, a little bit. I'll try to be brief so that the other people can talk a little bit more. You see, in Germany at least, we have also a federal system, and in Bavaria, where I'm located, the shops opened up on the 27th of April, so it's not that long time ago. But if you're looking into the general problem of the economy here, then having money is the biggest problem, or having orders and gaining money. So what we have here in Germany is one tool is the short time work. So this means that the people do not get unemployed directly. They are getting paid by the state more or less on a 60% base. So to give you a little bit an impression, at the moment we have 10.1 million in this status. This is about 20% of the working population, because we have about 45 million here in Germany who are employed. And the unemployment rate is already a little bit rising, but not to that extent. For example, in Bavaria, it's 3.6%. And this means that it's got up about 70,000 people. What I would like to say, because we had a survey running the last days, is what are the needs of the companies at the moment? They want to get tax payments back, to get more liquidity. They also want to have a reduction in taxes due to losses they made. They want to have more investments, subsidizes for investments, as well as funding programs for digitalization, because there seems to be still a lot of work to do in the companies. And they also want to reduce the value-added taxes so that they get more working capital for whatever that might come. And once you're looking in some companies, I looked up, for example, what is Siemens and Schaeffler doing, because they are producers in the industry. Bigger ones, automation and production technology, as well as automotive. So a lot of people in the administrative sections, they are doing home office. They are reducing their overtime budget, and they are reducing the holidays, as well as reduction of traveling, which is common because of the corona problems, that you should not meet people. But the production lines, they are running, at least to some extent. So the companies try to set up some plans how they could produce. And it's the same with the Schaeffler company, for example, also short-time work, reduction of overtime, but still they are producing. So as you can see, we are trying to get through it somehow, and where the things that could be done to earn money by producing products, they are still going on. So this is what I can tell from the German perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Christian. Thank you. Interesting to hear. Last but not least, let's go to Norway, and Björn. What do you have to say about the business life right now in Norway?
I mentioned that logistic was functioning very well, but I should like to mention one incident that it didn't function.
Okay.
Because we had a trailer coming from Germany with infection control equipment. The hospitals in Norway were about to go empty, and that trailer was stopped at the Swedish border. And the Swedish ambassador in Norway tried to help to solve the problem, and he was not able to help. So the end of the story was that the foreign minister of Norway had to contact Ursula von der Leyen in the European Union to solve the problem, because the European Union had decided not to export these type of products to countries outside the European Union. And Norway is not a member of the European Union. So that's also a case, but it's a small story, and it's strange for our Norwegians to know that it was the Swedes that stopped that trailer. I should also like to mention that in Norway now we are talking about a lot of the virus, but we actually face two crises at the same time when we are talking about the economy, and that is the oil price that has gone from $70 per barrel down to less than 20. And I read that even in the States, you get paid for taking oil, because some of the oil producers in the States, they don't have any place to store it. So when we are talking about when we are coming back to normal, I think it will take a long time.
Yeah.
But said that, it's always possibilities to do business in another way. And we will now experience a complete change in the consumer behavior. The people now buying things on internet is, I mean, it has exploded.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, the logistics are functioning. I have myself bought a lot of different things. I mean, the grocery stores, they have increased their turnover with about 50%. And now the businesses that are selling groceries on the internet, they are really doing business.
Yeah.
And we see also takeaway. I mean, you just have to think and find new ways of doing business.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can do that from Sweden as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
The Norwegian market.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much, Björn. It's interesting to hear from all of you, and maybe we could ask one quick question to all of you, because that's the most wanted question, I think, from the audience is, when do you think we can travel to your country to do business again? When can we actually travel to your country to do business again? Yeah. Just quickly, what's your expectation there? Is it 1 month, 2 months, 6 months? When can we travel again?
Yeah.
The Norwegian government mentioned this week that they will keep the restrictions between Norway and Sweden until 15th of August.
Okay. And what about
that's a plan? That's a plan now.
Okay. And what about Italy, Federica? Do you know when we can travel to Italy and between the States and Italy?
I hope very soon, but I think we will be the same level as Norway, because the situation it's very hard. So I think till August it will be very difficult to manage it.
Yeah.
All right. And the others who would like to go, John?
Yeah. Well, I don't think in the worst case scenario, because of our fractured response here. I mean, the worst I see a year from now, everybody in the world will be traveling except for Americans and Africans, which will be the two parts of the world that are going to be most affected. Frederica, I don't know, August is when the second peak is going to start. And we're talking about a much worse situation we're going through right now. Hopefully that won't be the case, but that's certainly it. I might want to quickly add that, yes, I mean, the meat of our consulting business and here in the EEN here in the United States is having Europeans coming here and meeting Americans personally, finding the right partners. But we are finding different ways. Swedish companies have to be able to raise their visibility from afar. And even if you can't travel to the United States a year from now, there's still a way to move forward. And we're figuring that out. Surprisingly, we're getting more interest from European companies right now than in a long time. So I've been talking to 2 Italian firms already this morning.
Right. I suppose it's also different between different states in America. It could turn out to be quite different between the different states. But let's turn also, right?
Yeah, well, of course that's possible. But how do you control that on international travel? That's a little bit difficult. But
sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to fly to North Dakota, you probably can fly to North Dakota.
Right.
You might not be able to fly to New York or San Francisco.
Good. When will we be able to do business more as normal in China then, Joachim?
Well, in terms of actually coming from Europe to China, yes, that's what you're aiming at. Well, right now, as you probably know, if you're a Chinese citizen, you can travel to China. If you're not, you're banned from crossing the border. On a very short term, that will at least be the case. I mean, right now in May, what we have now is the big annual Congress starting 21st of May in Beijing, which was postponed from end of March due to the COVID-19 situation. Before that, there would definitely not be any travel easing up. But then, of course, after that, it all depends on when does China feel that the situation in Europe and US is under control, because they're, of course, very scared of import cases. So traveling in China, possible from now, traveling from outside into China. Let's see how fast the situation in the rest of the world is in control. So we might have to become Chinese citizens.
Thank you.
Good.
We also have a question from the audience concerning the shopping behavior that Björn mentioned in Norway, that there is a lot more e-commerce now. And we have a question here from a company who says, do you see any changes in the shopping behavior because of the crisis? And we know that that's what's happening in Norway and also in Sweden, I would say. But what about, for example, China?
Absolutely. I mean, e-commerce was growing very rapidly already before COVID-19 in China, but with COVID-19 in the beginning, it was a bit hard because the last mile deliveries were hard the whole logistics network did not really work because drivers were put into quarantine every time they delivered, etc. As soon as that was under control, the online shopping has definitely been increasing a lot, both buying domestic products delivered online, but also what is called cross-border e-commerce. So, for example, Swedish brands selling directly from Sweden and then shipping to China. So without having establishments of distributors in China. So if you're selling things online, China is definitely the right market to look for actively right now.
We heard that there is also a lot of e-commerce in Germany. Christian told us about that. Federica, I assume that you also see the same pattern in Italy, don't you?
Absolutely. Companies right here should change their behavior. They have to change their way. So the digitalization will be the only way to overcome this situation. Also, the shops are trying to change the way. Also, the big stores. I mean, I'm dealing with the fashion and textile, so I know that a lot of very big stores related to fashion and textile are completely changing their way, creating right now new channels where to start selling, because it's the only way to move on.
Thank you. Should we move forward with another question?
Yeah.
You have something there?
We have, there's quite a few. Are things running okay in terms of customs procedures, etc., also within the EU? What's your, we heard from Norway, they said, well, the logistics is working quite fine. What about customs, and what about the sort of the technicalities? Do you feel that it works well but it's for goods to cross borders? Anyone like to start? No one?
Well, I could just jump in and say in the United States, and this is possibly of interest to our friend in China, unfortunately, like I said, everything's politics. So what I'm going to see is that the U.S.-China trade relationship is going to deteriorate massively. And, we're going to blame China for this. We're going to make them the scapegoat. And I think, I think this is a big opportunity for Europeans. I don't think we will keep Chinese out of this country. I don't think we'll keep Europeans out. And as we know, President Trump especially likes Norwegians. And so Norwegians are always welcome to immigrate.
That's good. Just a really quick question for you, John, there as well. Do most entrepreneurs, do they like Trump, or are they a bit afraid of his way of doing stuff?
Well, it's changing now, right? His approval ratings are going down. The polls right now show that he will lose in November, possibly big, but it's a long way away, right? So nobody believed he was going to win 4 years ago. So who knows now? But I would say in business, most business supports Trump because of his deregulation, his tax cutting, and his nationalistic economic policy. But the more international businesses, the more they are against him, because they realize much of what he does is detrimental to the future economy. Yeah.
Of course, we are sort of watching this, what's happening there, and also the struggle between China and USA, as you were mentioning. So, Joachim, just could you say something about what's the view of this in China now?
No, but John is perfectly right there. Of course, what happened right before COVID-19 was that there was this phase one deal, and we thought that things would lighten up a bit in the trade relations between the US and China. The trade barriers, the tariffs are still there. I mean, they're still around 20% of the total value of goods from both sides. They didn't move much at all with phase one deal. There was a lot of commitments, and China committed to a lot of extra purchasing from US, etc. It's pretty hard to deliver on these promises in 2020 at least, because there's no demand for all these goods that they're committed to buying. So trade tensions will most likely remain. When it comes to customs procedures, they're working pretty well. Not within, there's been a lot of issues within the more medical equipment and personal protective equipment, etc., moving from China to Europe and moving from China to elsewhere, because there was suddenly such a high demand and no one really knew what types of products were certified by who and why. So there's really been first couple of months were a bit chaotic. It was almost Wild West and cowboy society. Now that's getting under control, but there's still issues with those types of exports. But the normal customs procedures are working pretty much like normal.
Good.
Thank you so much, Joachim. I think time's running quick when you have fun, isn't it? And we need to just to make some kind of
start to wrap it up a bit, maybe.
Yeah. And we also think about this, if you could give the Swedish companies some advice when they are going to do business in your country right now or in the near future, if there is any tips that you could say, okay, think about this or that. And I think that we could start in Norway this time. Björn, do you have anything you would like to say or add?
I just want to stress again the possibilities within e-commerce. You have now what you call click and pick. Instead of going to a shop, you just click and then you pick up your goods from a robot. And the customs and transportation and everything is functioning very well. It's just that we can't travel to Sweden without going into quarantine. And so that's a big thing. Unfortunately for the Swedes is that now we have a situation also that the Norwegian kroner is less worth than the Swedish kroner. And that's also a complete new situation. It has been many years since we have that is situation. But I'm sure that Norway will still be one of the most important export markets for Swedish companies in the future as well. Yeah. Definitely.
Very good, thank you. I think Christian, if you're still there from Germany, I mean Germany is an extremely important export market for Sweden, an engine in Europe. What do you think? Do you have any quick advice for Swedish companies who want to do business?
Well, we have different legislation rules coming up every week. So to be honest, you should have to check on a more or less weekly basis what the situation is like, and you have to contact your partners if you have already some in Germany really regularly, to be aware what is going on, how the supply chain is working, how logistics is doing, what they can do, how they are working, if they have enough money, if their employees are working. Or if you do not have contacts yet, you have to talk to multipliers, to clusters, to networks, to chambers, whatever, so that they can tell you how the situation is at the moment, because it's just too dynamic.
I think we're all just pretty much guessing right now as well, but let's try to be making educated guesses. That's what we're doing, I guess.
Yeah. I think most countries are like yours in Germany. We don't know from one day to another what's going to happen, if they change regulations, if they open up more or less, so to speak. So we know this is a little bit of guessing, of course. Yeah. But do we have any other advice to Swedish companies? Just short advice. We have 3 minutes left until we have to finish. Anyway.
I think it's short advice from the East is obviously, especially here where things are now up and running pretty much. I mean, suppliers are producing. There is goods available. There's also customers available who are buying things. And it's very easy to forget that things have moved much faster and picked up faster over in China than in the rest of the world now. So stay close to the market. And it sounds like a cliche almost. Of course, you cannot travel here right now, but still be very close to the market. Follow up on a daily basis. Because things are moving pretty fast here, so I think that would be a key advice. Don't stay away. And I saw some comments as well. Now, when you cannot visit these exhibitions, fairs, etc., I know that will not be possible over a couple of months, but you can still do business. Don't wait for the next big World Expo in 20-something. You need to stay close to your business contacts on a daily basis. Otherwise, they will forget you.
Thank you. And this is one way of doing it, I guess, with being online like this. And I think we're going to have to wrap it up now. Thank you very much for all of you. It's been great to have you. Maybe we have to do a rerun of this and in a few weeks and see what's the situation then. We'll come back to that. But thank you very much for the time and effort in helping us out with this one. Been really a pleasure and interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I change to Swedish again och säger tack till alla som har lyssnat, och vi, som Marcus sa här, kommer kanske tillbaka om de här marknaderna eller andra. För övrigt så kör vi ju ofta sådana här webinars med aktuella områden som rör corona och olika kris eller positiva aspekter så att säga. Så håll ögon och öron öppna. Följ oss i våra sociala medier och på våra webbar och så. Så nu så vill jag och Marcus från Enterprise Europe Network tillsammans med Helena Sarvalin som var vd på Handelskammaren och Johannes Falkeström på Business Sweden som tyvärr inte lyckades vara med som vi hade önskat. Vi vill tacka för att ni var med idag och så ses vi en annan dag. Thank you very much and bye bye.
Tack.